The Dinnshenchas, a rare type of fairy from Ireland, are a race of warrior women, like the mythical Amazons of ancient Greece. The few scattered descriptions that exist of these fairies suggest that they are a dwarf race, short in stature, only about 3 to 4 feet tall, who could easily be mistaken for young, wild-looking girls. The Dinnshenchas are secretive and reclusive, confining themselves to deep and tangled woods and misty fields where cows roam. They are a forlorn and furious people, saddened and enraged at the crimes humans commit against one another. Swirling into invisibility and rushing over the earth like an angry wind, the Dinnshenchas seek out their human prey, men and women who have committed terrible crimes and have escaped punishment. With tiny bows and arrows known as elf bolts or elf shots, the Dinnshenchas strike at their targets. After a sudden sharp pain that comes out of nowhere, those who have drawn the ire of the Dinnshenchas will be overwhelmed by a sudden, inexplicable feeling of terror. This is an instinctive reaction to having been marked for punishment by these relentless fairies. And the punishments these fairies have in store are severe. Those shot by the Dinnshenchas will find their lives turned upside down. Misery and misfortune will follow them in a never-ending cycle of loss, pain, and destruction that only gets worse over time, even if victims change their ways and dedicate themselves to good deeds. For the Dinnshenchas can't be reasoned with. They do not forget and do not forgive. But, fortunately, most of us have no reason to fear these merciless fairies, who only seek out and punish humans who have been particularly and unforgivably cruel. The Danya II, or Night Man, is a mysterious solitary fairy from the Isle of Man. He appears as an old grey fisherman, with flashing eyes and a tattered cloak that swirls on the wind like sea foam. The man himself takes on a misty, vaporous appearance, manifesting in the distance on cliffs and rocky beaches. So fragile and fleeting a figure, he threatens to break apart and drift away like smoke or sand. The Danya-Oie is a reclusive fairy, said to inhabit a lonely cave with a view of the sea and the sky. When children out gathering blackberries or travelers passing by wander too close to the Danya-Oie's territory, they are liable to be struck with a sprained ankle or wrist, or sudden sharp pains throughout their bodies. They get progressively worse the closer they get to the Danya-Oie. This is a warning to stay away. But the intentions of this ferryman remain mysterious. No one knows what he wants or why he wanders alone on cold, stormy nights. There is an air of sadness about the man, whose drooping form seems to carry a heavy load. But when a storm is on the way, the Danya-Oie has been known to release a chilling and mournful howl, warning fishermen and travelers to take shelter. Whether this fairy is trying to help or is compelled to cry out of rage or sadness is unknown. All that is certain is that this fairy of mist and wind and sea foam wants to be left alone. Throughout Spain, Portugal, the Philippines, and Latin America, stories are told of a fairy known as the Duende, or possessor of a house. This malicious fairy is always on the hunt for a house to haunt, preferring residences with children or other vulnerable people inside. For the Duende has a powerful hatred of all humanity and lives to make our lives miserable. A diminutive fairy not much bigger than a rat, Duendes have been described by witnesses as tiny, middle-aged, or elderly men or women in green cloaks and tall hats, with cruel smiles and long, icicle-like fingers. Duendes frequent dank caves and old forests, taking up residence in twisted, dying trees, and tossing rocks and dirt at humans who venture too close. A Duende releases a haunting whistle as it travels the world's wild places in search of human victims to follow home. Once it does so, it will slip through the cracks in a house's foundation and scurry inside the walls or hide out in attics, basements, or shadowy corners. Then the Duende will engage in all sorts of poltergeist-like activity, stealing objects, moving furniture, and encouraging children to swear or steal or otherwise misbehave. It is almost impossible to exorcise an entrenched Duende. Prayers and priests have no effect on them. So, if you're ever out in the woods and hear a bone-chilling whistle, don't go home. Instead, lead the Duende to a crowded place, where light and laughter and noise will send it retreating back into the shadows. Norse mythology and the fairy lore of France and northern England tell of the Duergar, a malevolent fairy that preys on travelers in forests and other far-off places. Duergarrs are short, under 2 feet tall, and dwarf-like in appearance. Witnesses have described them as wizened creatures dressed in moss and moleskin that tend to squat high up in trees, blending in with bark, leaf, and mushroom, and glaring down at the world with malice. For these fairies consider themselves the guardians of the fairy world. Their duty, above all else, to keep humans away from fairy paths and out of fairy affairs. If you ever spot a Duergar while camping or walking in the woods, you can be sure you have wandered too close to fairy territory, something the Duergar will not stand for. It will make it its mission to lead you away from fairy spaces, and for this task, it has a number of tricks up its moldy sleeves. Duergars will move or change human signposts, shift bushes and branches, or create confusing forks in the road until human trespassers become hopelessly lost. Duergars have also been known to mimic the sounds of wild animals, to whisper ominously from the darkness to scare off invaders, or to lead people on wild chases through the woods. Sometimes Duergars lure with pleasant sounds of chatter and laughter, and with visions of tiny bouncing lights, like fireflies, which are in fact small torches held high in the Duergar's gnarled hands. Falling for a Duergar's tricks can be dangerous business, for these creatures do not mean well, and may lead their victims to serious injury or even death over unseen cliffs and gorges. If you ever encounter a Duergar, or suspect you are being tricked by one, the best thing to do is retreat, find another camping site, or give up and head home. For fairyland is fairyland, and trespassing there is a crime the Duergar will make sure you regret. The Dullahan is a terrifying reaper-like fairy from Ireland, also known as the Dark Man or the Gan Cian, which means without head. The Dullahan is a headless horseman, and likely the inspiration behind the Sleepy Hollow stories that gave us all nightmares as children. The Dullahan rides a skeletal steed with flames dancing in its eye sockets and mist snorting from its nostrils. Dressed in tattered black rags, the Dullahan carries its own hideous head on its lap or tucked into the crook of its arm. The flesh of its face is mottled and pockmarked like moldy cheese and glows with a strange light, which the creature uses as a lantern to light its way in the darkness. Its black, fathomless eyes dart in all directions, while a horrifying grin cracks across its face, stretching always and literally from ear to ear. The Dullahan rides at midnight, racing down dark abandoned roads like a fell wind. Gates spontaneously fly open as this fairy passes, for there is no gate or door or lock that can stand shut in its presence. Those unfortunate enough to witness the Dullahan's terrible ride may find themselves splattered with blood, or struck across the eyes by the Dullahan's bullwhip, which is made from a human spine. As a servant of the darkest of the fairy queens, the Dullahan abducts humans and whisks them away to fairyland. Without speaking a word, the Dullahan draws its victims in, mesmerizing them with a mysterious hypnotic power. Unable to resist, victims willingly mount behind the Dullahan and take hold of its hollow form. They are then whisked away to another world. It is a rare person who will ever experience such a terrible adventure, and an even rarer one who will return alive. Those who do are warned never to divulge the secrets of the fairy people, under the threat of a visit from the Dullahan. As a herald of death, the Dullahan calls out the names of those about to die, drawing them irresistibly to their fates. It is said that wherever the Dullahan stops, a human will lose his life and be dragged away into the mist and the darkness. There is no known defense against the Dullahan, though it is said that this fairy has an irrational fear of gold and can be warded off with a coin or even a piece of jewelry, though only temporarily. Thanks for watching. I'm making slow but steady progress on this bestiary, but in time I hope to get to the end of the alphabet, so there will be a whole dictionary of scary fairies on this channel. I'll also be continuing with my Fairies in Focus series, where I go into more detail about one particular fairy or fairy phenomenon. I might branch out in that series and do some non-scary fairies as well, because I've noticed quite a few people wanting to know about the good side of fairies as well. I've been a bit slow with my uploading lately. Sorry about that, guys, just because I've had so much going on. Things are probably going to stay pretty busy for me up until at least May, when I can start uploading more regularly. So I really hope you guys will just bear with me in the meantime and just stick with me through slightly slower uploading period. In the meantime, definitely keep sending me your scary fairy stories. I love reading those. And of course, comment, subscribe, and like. And until next time, this has been a visit from your scary fairy godmother.